Hey, it's 1:31, and we wanted to get started, or 1:32 even now. So we'd like to welcome everybody to the chance to talk to John Speraw here, who's graciously given us some time in his busy UCLA, USA volleyball schedule for sure. So thanks, John.
Yeah, welcome. Yeah, it's great to be here.
Um, it's also great that you qualified, as to be.
Yeah, nice that we have the free time to actually do this because we qualified.
Yeah, exactly. Um, you know, as we talk today, like we did with Karch after he won the gold in the Worlds, I really hope that you can open up, but at the same time, we want to respect that you've got some things to do next, and that is win and not necessarily share all your secrets. So, in the idea there, Thomas Jefferson's quote is, I think, a pretty important one where you give us ideas without taking anything away from you, but make
Hmm.
sure that you keep your USA best secrets, if need be, secret until 2016 August or so.
Yeah.
Um, and a little sidebar, just a moment of, for me and for a lot of us, and you may not even know this, John.
Oh,
Dr.
didn't
Richard
know that.
Schmidt passed away yesterday.
Oh
Um,
my gosh.
he he he's been integral in the success of our team since '84. Carl McGowan and some of our motor learning experts leaned on his research for decades. This book is his fifth edition that's on the screen, and it's one of the best books you can ever read about drill design and learning and teaching because he was one of the top experts in how do you learn skill. But he passed away yesterday morning. He had lunch with John Aroney a couple days ago, and he's had a degenerative brain disease. Ironically, one of the most brilliant minds, as Carl said, suffered from a degenerative brain disease and passed away. Carl McGowan, I really liked what he said about it, which is if you want to make God laugh, just tell him what your plans are. And we're going to miss Richard. Dr. Schmidt really helped us a lot. So, and is part of what you has helped you become good too, I think, as well as me for sure.
Hmm. Right.
So, on a brighter note, hey, congrats.
Thank you.
Tell us
Yeah.
about this photos.
Yeah. Two great photos right there. I think you see a team on the left there that has a lot of love, and we have great camaraderie and a lot of team spirit, and they played as a team, and it was wonderful to see, and it's been wonderful to see the development of that over the last couple of years. And on the right, you have the cup, and it's only the sixth major USA Volleyball has ever won on the men's side, and so we're real proud of it. And obviously, like you mentioned before, the opportunity to lock in our bid to the Olympics is an incredible situation for us, so we're very happy.
Yeah, yeah, that's a little bit of celebration there. Tell us about the
Yeah,
mascots.
yeah, yeah. They're called Bobochons, and I don't really know exactly what they are, but they're a big deal over there. So we each got our own Bobochon.
Cool. All right, so you're headed to Rio. Um, you know, uh, People would like to know your sort of pathway, as I say here, decisions and desires that where you arrived at coaching our now 2016 Olympic team here in the future. How did you start coaching volleyball, or did you, or were you doing some other sport, or what? What's your history there?
Right. Uh, yeah, it's a good question. I started my collegiate years. I was played at UCLA and was really focused on medicine. I come from a family of doctors and nurses. My mom actually just retired from teaching nursing at the University of Tennessee. So I've been surrounded by that my whole life, and that's what I was going to do. And upon graduating, I was working in the hospital at UCLA, and Coach Skates asked me to help out. Al Skates, who was the head coach at UCLA at the time, obviously a legend and incredible winner. And he was always statistically ahead of his time. So he would always have a fleet of statisticians taking hand charts before the computers really became a big integral part of what we do. And so upon graduating, he asked me to help take some stats, and I was in the neighborhood, so I just started doing that. And the interaction I had with my former teammates and friends and helping them be a little bit better was something that I really enjoyed, and just kind of got me hooked on coaching. And so about a year later, I went in and sat down in his office, and I said, "Coach, I'm thinking about not going to medical school. I'm thinking about coaching." And he laughed, and he said, "I hope you're thinking about coaching women because there's more opportunities." And I said, I actually don't know I hadn't really considered gender, but I just know that it's something I might be interested in doing. And he says, well, as a matter of fact, Doug Beal, who at the time was the head coach of the national team, just called and asked me to coach the World University Games. This is the summer of 1997, so it must have been that spring sometime. And he goes, let me talk to Doug and see if you can be my assistant coach. And so he called Doug, and Doug allowed him to do that, even though I didn't have any coaching experience. So my very first official coaching job was actually with USA Volleyball and doing the World University Games in '97. And I kept doing teams every summer, basically. In fact, 17 of the last 19 summers, I've been doing something for USA Volleyball, whether it's a World University Games team. I've done 2 Pan Am games, youth national teams, junior national teams. One of those youth national teams I coached, I was an assistant coach for Hugh McCutcheon, who I didn't know at the time. And so I got to know Hugh, and then a number of years later when he was the head coach of the national team and I was at UC Irvine as the head coach, and they had moved to Anaheim, which was in the neighborhood, he called and asked me if I would be his part-time assistant coach. And so that got me that final step up to the top team, and I was an assistant coach for him in 2008, and then I came back and helped out Alan Knipe in 2011 and 2012, and from there I just was given the opportunity to become the head coach of the national team about a year later. So that's my path.
You bring up something that I'm not sure I see in the girls' side of club volleyball as well as the collegiate side, and that is, it seems like the guys share ideas and work together, even though you're at UCLA now and you were at UCI and stuff, that you would work with other college programs and share ideas to make the men's side better. What's that all about?
I don't know if it's true for everybody. I can't say that every single men's coach wants to share information, but I do think in general that there is a feeling like we want to make our national team better. I think there's decisions that are made up and down from the rules that we select to our involvement during the summers as assistants or helping out the national team or consultant coaches on trips. We all naturally gravitate, a lot of us gravitate towards helping out the national team, and there's a natural sharing of information as a result. Yeah, I think there's nice camaraderie on the men's side. I mean, even with last year, I'm sure we'll start talking about this a little bit, but even last summer, Aaron Russell, who was our starting outside hitter on our team this summer, so this is the summer before, we knew he was going to be a player for us, but he needed to go back and finish his degree. We jump tested him, and he was touching 11.6, which is not that notable and was surprisingly low. So I called Pav, and Mark Pavlik, the head coach at Penn State, who I have a really good relationship with, and I said, Pav, I need him to be touching a lot higher next summer. He could be a pretty big impact player for us. And Pav was really open-minded, wanted to help out the national team. So we actually paid to have our strength and conditioning coach go out to Penn State and meet with their staff. And I could be direct with Pav. I told Pav, I said, listen, when you're playing one of the weaker EIVA teams and you're going to win, I want Aaron to lift that day. And he understood that, like I could have a pretty direct and honest conversation with Pav, and I tell you what, that's exactly what happened. Aaron got a lot stronger that year, and then over the course of the summer, he jump tested for us this summer in August, just before the World Cup started, and was touching 12 feet. And so for him to go from 11.6 to 12 feet was a collaborative effort, and I knew that might make Penn State better this year, but at the end of the day, my job is to make sure we have the best team that steps on the court in Rio, and I'll do whatever it takes to make sure that that's possible. And if that means collaborating with some other head coaches in the country, then that's what I'm supposed to do, and I'll do it. And I've always felt that way.
Sweet. So how about John Speraw, coaching John Speraw. And one of the audience members, BJ, said, so we can blame Al Skates for having one less doctor in the world, right?
Yeah, there's plenty of them, though.
Okay. So what would the today's John Speraw tell the John Speraw that started the head coaching job now? What have you learned that you would have told yourself?
You know, I don't know that I would tell him anything. You know, I think there's so much value in going through that experience, maybe not knowing everything, because the lessons you learn are so much more valuable. I mean, if I really wanted to tell the 2013 John Speraw what was going to happen in 2015, my first reaction would be, don't stress so hard. You're going to qualify by winning the World Cup, which has never been done.
Okay.
But you know that the stress and that motive, that need to, or that, I don't know, in this job, it's a great job. It's probably one of the best jobs on planet Earth. But I tell you, there is some stress when your whole success in your endeavor comes down to potentially one match in a qualifier. And somebody could get hurt, somebody could be sick, somebody, Cuba, Canada, Mexico, Puerto Rico, somebody could play out of their mind and never miss a serve. There's a lot, you know, that hangs over your head in this job. And so that's the one tough part about this job. So I'd want to say, hey, don't stress so much. But you know what? That stress has made me better. I think it's made the team better. That drive to ensure that that doesn't happen and we get to Rio has, I think, created a really educational experience for me. I think this has been an unbelievably dynamic educational experience the last 3 years, and in a surprising way. I think I'm surprised at how much I've continued to learn through this experience of coaching the national team, more than I anticipated. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact I was so emotionally engaged in what I was doing. And so I don't know that I'd tell him anything. I think going through the ups and downs of this job have taught me a lot, and I don't think I'd want to give any hints. You know, I don't think I'd want to make it easier.
So that kind of leads me to those that do tell you stuff. If you're not going to tell yourself some stuff, and by that I mean, you know, who your mentors are, and you know, this is your team a few days ago.
Yep.
You've spoken of Al already. I'd be intrigued in how Beck has impacted you.
Yeah. That's exactly right. It's continuing to seek mentors, but mentors, there's a connotation there that means somebody that's older, and I don't know that that's necessarily always the case. I mean, certainly you see Coach Skates there in a real nice suit on the right, and we still take him on a trip a year. He likes to come on one trip a year, so I bring him during the summers, and it's always really fun to reconnect with him, and he still has such a great volleyball mind. I've also strived really hard to continue to pick the brains of my peers, and I'm number 14 there with a pretty interesting goatee and a lot more hair. And to my left is number 15. That's Eric Sullivan. So he was my roommate. Now he's the assistant coach at Texas Women's Volleyball. So he comes on the trips with us sometimes. I mean, he's a great volleyball mind. And then you mentioned Andrea Becker. And for those that don't know, Andrea has her PhD in sports psychology. I met her years ago. She was a doctoral student at the University of Tennessee, where my mom was, and they were on a research group together. And her PhD, her dissertation was on the components of great coaching from the perspective of a student athlete. So she was going around and interviewing former student athletes who felt they played for a coach they would define as great, and then try to determine exactly what those components were. So I've known her for a long time, and she comes from a different perspective. She didn't even really know volleyball all that well, and I find that to be incredibly valuable. And so she has become a coach's coach for me, and I think that's been really valuable. It's guided me. It's made me better. It's impacted our student athletes and athletes on the national team in a really positive way. And so her and I have created, I think, a really interesting niche in the sport. And I think a lot when I read about companies these days, whether it's tech companies or mostly technology, but you read about how they're trying to solve really complex issues, and usually if they're trying to solve a technological problem, it's somebody outside of that realm of expertise that'll solve something complex, because they come in and see something from a different perspective and see something that you may not have seen because you're in your own little bubble. So an
Yeah.
engineering problem will then be solved by a biologist or a chemist.
Yeah.
And so I think that's what's been really valuable for me, is I've been trying to continue to pick the brain of people who aren't volleyball people. When I hired Andrea, everyone thought I was crazy. They didn't understand it. Listen, I didn't need somebody else in the gym to coach passing. I can coach passing, and certainly having assistant coaches that can do that are great, but I wanted somebody that was going to expand my own experience and the experience of the people I coach. And so, yeah, I would consider Andrea a mentor of mine, and she's certainly impacted my coaching.
So I'm thinking that number 9 is Nygaard, right?
Yeah, there he is. Yeah,
Yes.
number 9. And I mean, there's a lot of guys in that photo that are still in the game. Number 7 is Mike Seeley, so he's the
Yeah.
head women's coach at UCLA. Right next to Nygaard, I think it's number 6, is Kevin Wong, so he was the announcer at the Olympic Games for beach. Reed Sunahara, you see he's the assistant coach with the flat top in the lower left. He's the head women's coach at West Virginia now. Stein Metzger is 2 people to his left, to our right. He's the head women's beach coach here. Rich Bland is next to him, and he's coaching girls volleyball down in Georgia. So there's a lot of people that are still in the game.
That is great how they give back to the sport.
Yeah.
So you've got a lot on your plate. Right now you're wearing UCLA colors, you might say. And
Yeah.
how do you manage the time between the two? Like right now you've qualified for Rio, so how much are you doing USA and what are you doing at UCLA?
Yeah, it was the big question, I think, when I decided to do this. Nobody had done it before, and the reason it became a possibility is because the calendar changed. So it used to be that the World Championships, the World Cup, those majors occurred in November and December, in the middle of what would be your season. And so they moved those to August, September. So when that happened, the entire international season, at least for the men, became confined to the summer, and coaching a men's team where your season doesn't start until January, it became a possibility. Really, it comes down to hiring great people. I think I've essentially, I feel like I've become a little bit more of a CEO than a standard coach these days. I have to manage more. My budget is more than doubled. The number of people I manage is more than doubled. So I have to have great people that I can delegate to, and I've been really fortunate with that. My staff here at UCLA, Brad Keller and Andrea Becker the last couple of years, and now Andrea's going back to academia, so John Hawks is here, who was an assistant with me at UC Irvine years ago. And on the national team with Matt Furbringer and Mike Wall, Nate Go, and everybody there on the support staff. I mean, it just makes the whole thing go round.
Yeah.
I think what I do now, I've thought about this a little bit. I coach. I mean, I literally, I just run practices, watch video, meet with players, get them in a performance mindset, figure out what peak performance is for them, and then I do it again. Like as soon as that's done, I go right back into playing a practice. So after that last ball drops with UCLA this year, I'm going to hop in my car, drive down the 405, and plan a practice and walk into a gym. And so I'm getting really pretty good at planning practices and coaching. What I miss out of this whole experience is probably some reflection time, and I think about that a lot. I think it's important for me to try and find that time, and I think for maybe some ancillary projects, like alumni development at UCLA right now is non-existent, right? I mean, that's just, somebody else is going to have to carry that banner for me. There's probably some things that I could do for USA during the off season, maybe in terms of helping grow the game a little bit more. I'd love to do that. I don't have the time to do that now.
Well, you're doing it
But
now,
it
so
is good.
thank you.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I love that. You know, and when I have the time, it's important. And certainly this time of year is probably the only time I have to do that. But I do love coaching, and it's working pretty well. I feel like I still able to maintain relationships, which is the most important thing. I feel like I can remain connected with the guys when they go overseas. So during part of your question was how do I do both at the same time? I go down to Orange County 1 day a week during the off season, have staff meetings, organize the week, and then schedule Skype meetings with the guys that are overseas. And then during the summer, when I'm with the national team full time, I do my best to try and write email updates to the guys, make a phone call here and there, and then of course try and continue to make a recruiting call when I'm in the country now and then.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, yeah, but it seems to be going okay.
So you got to plan a lot of practices. You've doubled the amount of time of practice planning.
Hmm.
You know, given the fact you've got the best players, a lot of coaches are wondering what your practices kind of look like. And, you know, I
Hmm.
couldn't find any whiteboard, so I pulled up a youth practice whiteboard example that I did with Carl
Hmm.
McGowan here. But what does
Right.
your practice look like for the national team?
Hmm.
Like in when you come back in May, and when you're getting ready before the a big qualification event or a big event.
Let's see. Preseason, how's it changed mid-season and late season? I think in general, my practices have a pretty consistent format in that I really, really believe in trying to encourage creativity, um, ball control. I, I love doubles for warm-ups. I love all mini games, narrow courts, over the net peppers with scores. You know, there's a ball control, and I'm trying to continue to find ways to increase the creativity early in practice. So almost all my practice has some element like that. Um, and then I really firmly believe in everybody being on the same page. So getting everybody to understand our system of play, how those systems of play are put under stress, what are the real subtle adjustments based on circumstance that challenge systems. So we spend, particularly in the preseason, a ton of time on systems and getting all those things put in place. And then it's about trying to train out of system play and transition once you can kind of get all those things in place. And so that would be a pretty general way of doing it. Whether at UCLA or on the national team, I mean, my players can tell you it's almost every single day I do some form of a drill where there's a multiple ball drill where one of those balls is put into play with some emphasis of system. So, for example, maybe we needed to work on long way sets to a particular player or a particular set. So we'll play a ball out, and initiate a ball that'll stress that system in some way. And just about every day I'm doing something like that. And then, of course, there's also trying to understand where you're weak rotationally and work on specific rotations and break down some of the things that are involved there too. So those types of things probably give a general oversight to the way I plan practice.
So one of the coaches has asked, have you made Tom Pestalozzi's four square net game a regular part of your practice?
No, I have not. He's been trying to sell me on it for a while. I actually have not seen it, and but if there's a coach out there that's going to figure out how to have fun and a good time and get his team to play better, it would be Pesto. So I probably need to head over there and check that out.
Um, Dustin is asking you kind of into the same area. How do your coaching philosophies and systems differ with the USA men and UCLA? And if so, how? Or are they pretty consistent?
They've been pretty consistent. They've been pretty consistent. There is with the national team, one of the things that I always remember Lloyd Ball talking about was the difference between experienced player and inexperienced player is the way they talk the game. And I think what I've learned from my national team experience is as we discuss systems and try and polish them up, they really want to dive into exactly what happens with different circumstances. So say, for example, you want to run a middle blocker in a particular pattern. What happens when that ball is 3 feet more to the right, and then 3 feet more to the right from there, and 3 feet more to the right from there, and all across the court. They want to know exactly what the next move is. This is your system, but what do we do from there?
Yeah.
And there's a real high level of communication and thought process that goes into the dialogue with the national team players that has been educational for me. And certainly, I mean, the nice part about these jobs is that coaching these national team guys makes me better for when I go back and implement systems with UCLA. And every year I'm with UCLA, I'll tinker around with the drill that's really good, and I'll bring that back to the national team. So it's been mutually beneficial for both these jobs. But I think in general, the systems I think are pretty similar, and I don't think that's unusual. Maybe that's one of the reasons why we're having the ability to bring some of these young players in and have them be successful at such a young age. Taylor Sander, Aaron Russell, these guys are coming out of programs that are running fairly advanced systems. They're running high-level BIC, so now, okay, we may need to refine exactly how we're going to run it, but those guys have been doing it and playing at tempo. And so asking them to step up to the next level, I think they're doing that pretty seamlessly. And so I don't think that's unusual for me and the systems that we teach and utilize. I think across the board you might be seeing a little bit more of a similarity between what's going on at the university level and what's going on internationally.
And do you talk to Karch at all? Because one of the questions that came in from staff was, it seems like the athletes on the women's side are coming in younger and younger and starting. I mean, you've got 3 of your starters on the men's side that are 23 or 24 and under, and that's not the way it was when you won the gold in 2008 for sure.
Yeah, very different teams. I do talk with Karch. Karch and I have actually a very good relationship that goes back years. When I was at UC Irvine and he was living in Orange County and still playing, we're both Bruins, so we used to get together and chat, and I had him come and talk to the team. And so I've known Karch for a long time. Our schedules are a little different, but we carve out some time to sit down every year. I love it. Obviously Karch is so bright and works so hard at his craft. We always have wonderful conversations. In terms of the guys, they are coming in really pretty advanced, and the teams between 2008 and this team now in 2015, it's just a different circumstance. And I don't know that there weren't players back in 2008 that couldn't come in and play, but they just didn't have the opportunity. In 2008, we had a lot of guys that had logged a lot of time into the national team gym and were very good. And one of the things that I knew coming into this quad is that this was going to be what I would term a high-risk quad. I mean, we were going to probably retire out a number of players. Loy wasn't coming back. He's just, as much as everybody would love it, he's not coming back. And you look down and you knew that Reed and Sean Rooney and Clay, those guys were getting older, and we've seen that they've struggled to maintain their health and stay with it. And so I knew coming in it was going to be a challenge, and that we were going to have a youth movement. So part of our youth movement is that these guys are physically ready to come in and play, but it's also that the opportunity is there for them to come out and play. And
Yeah.
I've been real aggressive with that. I mean, I knew it. I came in with a mindset that I was going to have to do that. I could see it. And I think working with you in 2007 and 8, and then working with Al in 2011 and 12, one of the things I think was a real benefit to me is being an assistant coach at the international level for a couple different quads and gaining some perspective over what made teams successful over a long period of time and coming in with a plan. And I certainly knew that plan was going to involve taking some risk and giving some guys some opportunities, and they've simply taken advantage of it.
Yeah. So you've got a young guy in the role of libero for sure. One of the coaches has asked, it seems like people are putting the libero on left back. A lot of talk about that, at least at the junior girls level. It's not on the slideshow, but what do you think about where you put Soji and the players, the libero specifically?
Right. There's probably a number of different variables that go into making a decision about what you would do. The simple one is how are you going to dig more balls? I mean, how are you going to give yourself more opportunities? And where is the strength of each individual player? I think for us, one of the components of the decision for us is the BIC attack and whether or not you'll have a BIC in transition. But the dig is the most important thing, and oftentimes you're not digging that ball in a position where you can even set a BIC. So the first priority is where you're going to dig the ball most. Put your best digger where the balls go the most of the time. For us, BIC is something to be considered. And honestly, for us, if you watch us play, it kind of changes through the rally. So the first ball, say we receive serve, we'll receive serve, and as the BIC attacker comes down the middle of the court, if he's not set, he's already committed to that approach. You know, it's a tempo set, so it's not like he's going to stop and get deep coverage. He's already in. And so we have him stop and actually be a part of the tight hitter coverage. He's inside the 10-foot line after he doesn't get set. If there's a transition out of that, oftentimes what's happening is Eric will stay deep in hitter coverage and take area 6 defensively in transition, not middle back, not left back, and the big guy will go to left back. So you'll actually see some guys transition to different positions on the court depending upon what their circumstances are. We've moved guys around based on tendencies of an opponent. If a guy is a real cross-court guy, maybe we'll put Eric at left back. If he's a high flat guy who hits a lot off the block and deep, maybe we'll put him in area 6. And it depends a little bit on how good your outside hitters are at defense. As it turns out, Aaron Russell is not a bad defensive player for a guy at 6'8". So those are all different variables that you might look at.
Yeah, sweet. And I'm changing the slide to a book, and I happen to love the quote by Oscar Wilde that it's what you read when you don't have to that determines what you will be when you can't help things out. But tell us about this book and how you used it.
I read this book for the first time this past June, and I read it, and it just moved me. I mean, it was, for those that have not read this book but love sport, it is at the top of your list. In fact, you should probably stop reading what you're reading right now and start this. I couldn't recommend it more. Probably one of the top 5 books I've read all time. And there's so many themes in this book that are applicable to team sport, particularly those of an Olympic aspiration. And I had never asked the national team guys to read before. In general, coaching the national team, sometimes you deal with some guys that have been around the game for a long time. And as they've been around the game for a long time, they're playing for professional coaches and this coach and that coach and these systems, and they can get a little grisly. You know, sometimes those guys just want to go play, and they don't want to talk about some things. They just want to play. And I try and push against that as much as I can. And I have to be careful about how much, but I push against it because I don't want guys to be grisly. I want them to be open-minded. I want them to have fun. I want them to be creative and keep having them a deep understanding of what it means to be a part of a great team. And a lot of times the professional environment in which these guys spend a lot of their time, that's not the emphasis. It's about the individual. And so I decided I was all in on this World Cup. I don't know if anybody's talked to you about that or not, but I mean, I asked this team to do a lot in preparation for this, from the amount of hours spent in preparation, video and game plan wise, to the emphasis that we put in the weight room, and certainly the focus that we brought to the training environment. But I also decided we were going to read a book, and so I bought everybody a copy, and they were actually required to do a certain number of chapters a week, and then we would get into a room, and actually I had Andrea Becker run sessions based on what those chapters were discussing, and I'm telling you, it was awesome. It was, I mean, sometimes the guys, you know what my favorite part is? I've assigned books to collegiate teams, and what I find is that sometimes you'll hear a lot of complaint, and then you'll hear quotes from the book the entire year. So they'll complain about it and then talk about it endlessly. and I actually didn't get a whole lot of complaints from this because the book is actually quite good. But you heard a little bit here or there. But I mean, the dialogue all the way through, even in the World Cup. I mean, in the locker room, I can't remember if it was before Poland or before Russia. I heard a bunch of the guys talking about it, and we have a very large Hawaiian contingent on the team, and they started calling the team the Bratas in the Canoe. And I heard that in the locker room, and I was just like, I mean, it's so valuable. The guys are talking about this book and the themes that are in this book, and the brotherhood that comes with this experience, and it really inspired dialogue about what it means to be a great team and to have somebody's back. And I just thought it was an outstanding experience for everybody.
Simply awesome. Thank you for sharing that. So you, I don't know when you have to cut. Is it April 15th, 17th, down to the final 12 and 2? This was pulled off the 22 group. I know.
Right.
You've got some roster names here. You've got to cut to 12. When does that happen?
It's actually a date that needs to be worked out with the USOC. There's a lot of procedural stuff that needs to be done in time to get everything set for security and the village and all the things that go into this event, which is significant. So they're working it out, but I believe it'll be sometime in mid-July. So
Oh,
we could, yeah, we're talking about trying to make it after World League is done, so we can have the entire World League to make a decision. I don't know that that's what's going to happen. I know there's been some emails that have been going around about what that date is going to be. It hasn't been
fantastic.
finalized.
That gives you, yeah, lots more time.
Sure. Yeah, I know in years past, what we did is we just decided to make a decision maybe late June, even before the World League Finals. So we were in a position where we would go to the World League Finals with the team that would be the Olympic team. The real challenge for us is that they've changed the number of roster spots for every tournament now, World League, World Champs, World Cup, to 14, and they haven't changed the Olympics to 14. It's still 12. So one of the hardest parts, obviously, of this job is that you have to tell somebody that they're not going to the Olympics, but now it's even a little bit more challenging because there's potentially a couple of guys that have made every other trip and been on a World Cup championship team and don't get to go to the Olympics. I think that's pretty harsh.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but that's apparently what we're going to have to do.
Well, because you've got the best in the world, a lot of people have been asking, how do you guide the guys that are on the bench, especially if they've never sat on the bench up until now? And in an ancillary way, one of the coaches asked, it seemed like when they watched the entire World League event as much as they could online, or I'm sorry, World Cup event, that you 98% of the time went with a starting six, and those six stayed no matter who you were playing. And what was the rationale behind that?
I'll answer that one first. The rationale is that I knew going to this event, you could kind of look at the way it was laid out, that every single point, every single set was going to matter. And I wanted to put our best guys on the court. And I really wasn't exactly sure how I was going to manage the team all the way through the event. Like I recognized that I was going to have to kind of figure some things out on the fly. I think in my mind I was prepared to make more substitutions than I did. But when we would get into matches, for example, the first several matches, we were able to get some 3-0 wins. So the amount of load that we were placing on certain players wasn't as high as maybe I had originally anticipated. I mean,
Yeah. And yeah, you
besides
were
the
superior to everybody in 3-0 wins, like 2-to-1 ratio.
yeah, that's right. And besides that set versus Japan, when they decided that I'll just go back and absolutely obliterate their serve and not miss that one set, I mean, we were beating everybody in three. So then you kind of adjust on the fly. Okay, we're doing pretty well here. And And so the first 3 matches we were able to do pretty well. Then you're playing Italy, so you're going to go with your best versus Italy. And one of the biggest risky matches I saw the entire tournament, as I tried to predict, was Egypt. Egypt is actually very good. They're big. They have some experience. Their opposite has played in Europe for a number of years. And I knew that it was our 5th match in 6 days, and I knew that we were just going to be coming off of Italy, which I knew would be an emotionally engaging match. So if there was a letdown that was going to occur during this tournament, it was going to be against Egypt. And so yeah, you're going to go with your guys there. I wasn't just going to randomly put guys in.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that happened in this World Cup is after that first 5 matches, they gave you 2 days off instead of 1. So we had 2 days off, played 3, 2 days off, and then 2 days off, played 3, 2 days off, played 3. So the extra day off gave me a little bit more confidence in going with our guys. I mean, the other thing I thought too was you could do it with volume and changing up guys. You know, like going to your bench frequently. It's a concept that some teams used, and I bet you some teams really regret. And I was prepared to do that. Like you look at the World Cup, you think, God, you're going to have to do that. But I just felt like we were playing well, and the risk was going into the last 3 series and being tired, but we were young. And I thought, gosh, if there's one thing we can do now with this group of players is these guys can keep playing. And in that last match, you could see it. I mean, Aaron Russell was flying in the last match. This guy played almost every point of the World Cup. He was flying. And he actually really carried us to the win because the one guy that really probably gassed out in that last match was Matt Anderson. He didn't have anything left. But, I mean, for 10 of those 11 matches, Matty was unbelievable. And so it worked pretty well. I mean, I understand there's different ways to do it, but I bet you Poland regrets it. I mean, they went into it with the idea that they were going to play a lot of their bench in matches that they felt they had a lot of confidence that they were going to win, and they dropped a bunch of sets. They didn't lose points. But they went 4 with a bunch of teams, and they ended up not qualifying partially as a result.
Gotcha. So do the guys on the bench for that entire tournament or other times when they're not getting on the court, how do are there any words of wisdom to those varsity coaches at the scholastic level who have a starting group, but they have 12 good players? What are you saying to those U.S. guys that are on the bench?
Yeah, you gotta train the heck out of them too. I mean, we kept training those guys on the bench when we could during the World Cup. Sometimes during those days off, the guys that have been playing a lot, they wouldn't do anything, but the coaching staff was out there working with the other guys trying to make them better. And so if you're equally as engaged in making every player you coach the best player they can be, and they know that you're invested in them, that helps. Doesn't
Yeah.
alleviate it all, but it helps. I think I was real clear with communicating roles, and maybe there was some situations where I didn't even, I probably should have communicated maybe more than I did. I always think that. But I think everybody understood what their role was, and so they may not have liked it. Maybe they wanted to play more, but I think they understood what their role was. For example, David Smith played a lot for us during World League and didn't play that much for us during World Cup. He knew David Lee was playing well. He knew exactly what his statistics were because we talked about it going into World Cup, exactly where his strengths and weaknesses were. I also knew that he had a real good jump serve, and so there were situations where a team was passing a float serve really well, and maybe we would go to David Smith because he's got a jump serve instead of David Lee's float, and maybe we could have done that versus Poland actually because they were passing the float so well. So there's specific reasons why you want to make changes, and you can communicate that to the guys.
Yeah.
Paul Lotman knows that if there's a problem with passing, he's going to come in. So that's part of it, and that can help alleviate it too. Of course, winning helps. If you're winning, and the guys are on the bench and they know you're winning and you're going to go with those guys, I think that helps. If we were losing and I wasn't making any changes, there'd probably be some problems down there.
Right.
Yeah, but I think it's about investment, communication, um, them understanding that you're going to give them shots, and when are those circumstances going to occur? Yeah, those are all a couple. I had another thought too, but it just slipped my mind. I'll hit it.
Yeah. One of the coaches just asked, if you get a player in a slump, do you let them play through it or do you replace them? Kind of an interesting, broad question.
Yeah, I try really hard to. One of the things that Andrea Becker has really been pushing me over the course of my coaching career is to try and be more patient with players and she calls it coaching for confidence. And it's a really interesting concept, and I'm still learning it. The balance has made me reconsider how I manage matches, and I'm not sure I'm all the way there yet, but for example, the story that I tell, and maybe some people have heard it before, but it's a good one, is traditionally if you have a weak server, um, a lot of times it's a middle blocker that's going back to serve late in the set. You've got a guy on the bench that can serve pretty well. You go with a serving sub. And now here's Andrea. She doesn't know volleyball very well. It's her first season with me at UC Irvine, and I'm taking out Dan McDonald. And she goes, "Why do you do that?" And it's one of those questions you can't even answer. It's just you do what you do. We all do that. I don't know why. He's not a very good server, and I've got a guy back here that can serve better. She goes, "Yeah, I don't like that. I don't think you should do that anymore." And I go, "What are you talking about? Like, this is what you do. Every volleyball coach does this." She goes, "Yeah, don't do that anymore." And I kept doing it, and finally, one time she got pretty terse with me, and she comes down, she goes, "Don't do that anymore. I want you to walk up to him. I want you to tell him, I'm never taking you out of a volleyball match again. I'm never doing it. And you're going to go back and you're going to serve, and you're going to hit it. And I'm never taking you out. I don't care how many times you miss. I want you to tell him that, and then you're not allowed to take him out anymore." And I was like, wow. I mean, I've never done that as a coach, and but sometimes I'm a good listener, and so I did what she told me to do, and I never took Dan out again. And because I put my faith in him, because I didn't backtrack on that, um, he felt confident to go back and make errors and play free, and he served an ace to win the national championship in 2012. And I mean, to me, that's a remarkable story. The guy really had a hard time serving the ball, and he serves a walk-off ace. And I never would have done that had I not been pushed to do that. And so getting back to the question about somebody that's in a slump, I think I'd spend a lot of time trying to allow them to play through it, probably more than I would have in the past based on my experiences. And there's a lot to that. There's conversations with the player, what's going on in their mindset. And I've learned a lot about sports psychology with my experiences with both Andrea Becker and Ken Ravizza, who was actively involved in the 2008 team, and I've read a lot about it. So now I can have these very open-ended, open question conversations with players to get them talking about their experiences and get them thinking the right things, saying the right things to themselves, dive into the technical aspect of what they're doing, make them a better volleyball player, and give them the freedom to go out and make mistakes. And I think if you do that and you invest in players, you give them the freedom to make error and truly teach them what the learning process is and how uncomfortable it can be, I think you'll probably find the player get through that.
Hey, that's fantastic. Thank you for sharing that, because I think that goes all the way down to 12 and under volleyball for sure.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. So, one of the things that people have asked or pointed out, is simply that you're kind of calm on the sidelines, for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
Have you had to work at that, or just is that part of your MD doctor personality?
I haven't had to work on it. Maybe I have. Let let me backtrack a little bit. Sometimes you come to a place and there's a lot of experiences that build towards this one area. I'll give you an example. So when I was in 8th grade, my cousin is a general surgeon oncologist, and he was the attending at UC Davis. Very successful guy. He's been a really impactful researcher in the areas of breast cancer. He's now at the University of Vermont. But he was at UC Davis. So I was in the 8th grade. My mom called him and said, "Listen, John really interested in medicine. Can he come hang out with you?" And so I flew up there. He got me in scrubs, got me a white lab coat. I went on rounds with him. I hung out with him for a week, and I saw some really graphic surgeries, open heart surgery, blood's flying everywhere, intestines all over the table. And I was 2 feet from it. Like, he had me in surgery right behind him, observing all of it. I mean, it was an unbelievable experience for an 8th grader. And there were points when that was happening where I recognized in myself, I'm an 8th grader, and I had to tell myself, that's over there, you're right here. Yet I learned through that experience to compartmentalize. Because if you actually thought about what was going on right there, it would make the strongest stomach sick. And I think I'm able to say, I think I learned that at a young age, to say that's going on over there and I'm right here. And staying like compartmentalized from it. Now, it doesn't mean to say that I don't get emotional, and I do think that no matter what I do, under stress, we all become a little bit more left-brained, and I don't think I'm not maybe at my peak sometimes because of the stress that we're under. I think that's true for all coaches, and so it's always a challenge for us, maybe to do exactly what we ask our athletes to do, which is to play at one point at a time. How do you really do that? And maybe as a coach, you can't always be one point at a time because you're supposed to be a few points ahead. So it's a real big challenge for coaches, and I understand that. I'm by nature pretty calm. I think as an athlete I was, and I think I've been able to continue to learn how to apply that in this endeavor. But yeah, I'm pretty calm, and there's some good parts to it, and there's also some other parts that I think I need to compensate for. My teams in general have been quite poised. I think if I'm poised, the team is poised. I think if I'm calm, I have recognized that I also have the ability to dial it up intentionally to get the team going. If you're already at a high and you need to get them going, it's really hard to do that. For example, in the Tunisia match, I intentionally dialed things up because in the 3rd set we were real flat. And so I stood up and I was talking more and I was yelling at the guys, go through your checklist, next point. Here, I mean, I don't know if you could hear me through the telecast, but 3rd set Tunisia, I was far different than I was maybe any other match of the tournament. I've yelled at referees intentionally to kind of get things going. Becker recognized it. I can't remember what match it was, but I got going a little bit, and the guys recognized how invested I was. And maybe it was one of the Brazil series that we had in Southern California. And she's like, listen, the whole team was watching you, and then brought some energy. And so I recognize that sometimes my calm demeanor is a plus and a minus. Like, it's a plus because we're poised, but sometimes my teams can be a little flat. So I need to figure out how to get them going and talk about that and prepare for that and make sure there's guys on the team that are empowered to demonstrate leadership ability in that regard. And I talk probably more about energy than other coaches. The coaches running around over there probably doesn't need to talk about energy. For me, I probably need to talk a little bit more about energy. So it's understanding who I am and what that brings to the team. Because ultimately the team is going to be who you are. And if you're over there panicked and yelling and screaming, your team is going to be panicked. I'm convinced of it.
Yeah, really great observations. Related to this, got a couple of questions coming in about, keeping them focused in the present, one point at a time. Came in from Lee, but on a general way, they say, given the limited amount of time we have to work with young club players, what ideas come to mind to help a youth player develop a performance mindset? It's something that you had mentioned earlier.
Wow, that's a There's a lot to a performance mindset. Um, there's, gosh, where to begin? You know, first of all, you have to understand exactly what that means to you. You have to learn what that is from a big picture perspective and try and teach all the different components that go into that. What is mental toughness? How do you teach that? That's a really complex subject matter. I mean, we could probably talk for another hour and 15 on that.
Yeah.
There's so, and here's the other challenge. When I originally brought Andrea Becker in to work with me at UC Irvine, what I told her before I hired her is that I wanted her to develop a 5-year rolling curriculum for a team, so that after she left, I could have a mental training program built. The issue is that mental training is actually a pretty individualized endeavor.
Absolutely. Very specific. Yeah.
It's real specific. People come in with some strengths and some weaknesses, and they're all different. So to sit in front of a room, this is where most sports psychologists really whiff. You can come in and talk in front of a room about a particular thing, and some guys are in the back thinking the guy's a quack, and the other guys are thinking he's great. But it's more of an individual discussion. You have to find out exactly where people are. In general, performance mindset is about freedom, I think. I think, and maybe at the national team level, more than anywhere, what you'd be probably surprised is this. You're really public, okay? The media is there, Twitter followers are there, people are judging you. Um, there's not a lot of freedom. You could really be encumbered by your concern about other things, external things. You can be concerned about contracts and how much money you're going to make the next year based on your spot on a World League roster. I mean, I think as you get older, there's probably more and more things that encumber your performance mindset. And so to me, it's about trying to help players feel free, to understand the learning process. What is the learning process? How does it feel? When does it make you uncomfortable? Why is that? How do you manage that?
Yeah.
How do you deal with a big match and a big point and a big swing? And how is that different from the first one? And how do you deal with the media and the judgments? And how do you make sure you still have fun and play free? It's about trying to find freedom for everybody.
So do
And
your
there's
guys
skills.
worry about when their parents are there, John?
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing is that I think, I don't know if this is a millennial thing. Maybe that generality is not always appropriate, although I think it probably merits discussion. But the guys, they really don't. They don't want to fail. And they've been given so much feedback. I mean, this gets to the growth mindset of Carol Dweck. I think it's really applicable here in that when you're dealing with high-level collegiate or international athletes, they have been told for their whole lives that they are a great volleyball player. And in a lot of ways, in my opinion, it's identical to the feedback that Carol Dweck studied when somebody would tell a young person that they're really smart versus how hard they work. So when somebody's being told their whole life that you're a great volleyball player, a lot of times their 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 learning process is affected because they don't want to be perceived as not a good volleyball player. And we know when we're asking people to do something different, they're going to fail. They're going to get worse before they get better. They're going to make mistakes. And I'm telling you, on the national team, it's as bad as anywhere. It's probably bad with 12-year-olds, but you should try talking to some of these guys that have had a whole lifetime being built upon being a great volleyball player. It's hard. It's really hard for them to go through the learning process. And so you need to tell them what the learning process is. This is what it is. This is what's going to happen. I'm going to tell you one thing. You're going to make a mistake. It's going to feel awful, and I'm going to need you to stay with it. And here's why. I mean, I need to have those conversations with the national team guys, especially a lot the first couple years of the quad. And it's hard. It's just as hard for a national team guy as it is a 12-year-old to have those negative things occur and still charge forward.
Yeah, you make me think of that great book, Faster, Higher, Stronger by Mark McCluskey, where Dan Coyle says it's no longer an athletic competition, it's a learning competition. And who can
Ooh, I
learn
like that.
faster and learn better? Yeah. So
I haven't
tied
read
into
that,
that
so
word
that's a
freedom,
good quote. Yeah,
John, a really
yeah.
interesting question about freedom. You know, since your game plans are very specific, Jim Ray asks, do the players have a freedom to adjust? And if so, what kind of adjustments can they make? And what kind of adjustments come from the coaching staff?
Oh, 100%. I mean, I really want that. I mean, one of my favorite concepts is Charles Darwin's concept about species that survive. It's not the strongest nor the smartest, it's the one that's the most adaptable. I think that that's really true for a lot of what we do. It's about adaptability. And so a lot of our dialogue that occurs is what occurred, how did we respond, maybe why didn't we respond sooner, what did you see, what was the communication pattern, um, what could we have done differently, let's go out there and do that and execute. And so I think there's a lot of that discussion that goes on. I mean, the guys at this level talk the game really well. And so I find when you have Matt Furbringer is in charge of our defensive schemes during the course of the volleyball match, he has the opponent's offense, and during a timeout, you'll find in these huddles more than any other that he'll be with David Lee, who's really good at talking the game, and Max Holt, David Smith. They'll be over there, and it's a dialogue. Okay, it's definitely not a coach saying this is what we're going to do. I mean, sometimes there is, and certainly we want to come up together with a plan as fast as we can and be directive so everybody understands their responsibilities on the next point. But there's definitely a give and take between the players, and it can be David thinking I needed to do this. Well, this is and Furbringer saying, well, this is what they've done the last 3 plays, and here's what they've done the last 10 matches, and let's go with this. And David going, okay, I see that. And so I think there's quite a bit of give and take, but I would love it, and we actually try and encourage our players to make adjustments more quickly than they oftentimes do.
So I love that adaptability and stuff. One of the slides, the next slide, asks this question of one of the guys on the stand, which is, are you going to run that back row libero attack in the near future that Eric's pulled off?
Yeah, well, I mean, he's hitting 1,000, so I guess we've got to better look at it. I mean, what an incredible play. I mean, and I think a huge point. I mean, the scores don't indicate how well Argentina was playing and what they were doing in that moment. And for us to get that point and get that particular server off the line was a really big point for us. So, I mean, it's a highlight, always will be. I believe some people have called it the play of the World Cup, and it might very well be.
Yeah, and some nice guys on that stand there. Obviously, a lot of guys wearing USA for sure.
And, I mean, a lot of guys that we should be watching. I think, you look at the guy in the middle, that's Syed from Iran, and to his left is Soleil from Argentina. They're 6'6" middles. They're not 7-footers, and they're two of the best in the game. And I think it's really fascinating to watch them play and see what we can learn from what they're doing as highly skilled as they are.
Awesome, awesome. So, I think one of the things I've always admired is how well the team blocks. For instance, David Lee, you've mentioned, now he's not in his first, this isn't his first rodeo.
Yeah.
How come the guys block so well? What do you think makes the USA team sometimes outblock their opponents like on a 3-to-4 ratio?
Yeah. I think it's a combination of things. I think there's been a lot of people in the USA gym over the years that taught blocking really well. I mean, you've mentioned Carl. Obviously, Coach Skates was a great teacher of blocking. So, there's been some mentors in this gym of mine that really have been great there. I think it's something that, I'm a former middle blocker. It was something that I felt really comfortable coaching early on in my career. I think a lot of guys have been receiving great feedback on it. We even had Jim McLaughlin in the gym early in the summer. He was over there with his iPad doing nothing but giving feedback on blocking. I mean, we bring in people that know what they're talking about that skill. And we've been good at it. I think we have good system play. I think the fundamentals are there visually. I think we emphasize that well. But there's lots of room for improvement, a lot. I think it's one of the most complex skills. And, that I actually think we could be much better. I'm happy to hear that you think we're doing well. I see that as an area where I think we really could get better and continue to move the needle.
Well, let's move on to another place that, general criticism of the men's game is the volume of missed serves. And, the Sunday is saying it and Barney's saying it, and just in a big picture, because it seems like in the last few months, Aaron's float, Micah's and Matt's jumpers, just watching you guys from Detroit till now, do you have an acceptable ace to error ratio or guidelines for the number of errors you should stay under, or do you just, using that term that I think is brilliant from Beck, coaching for confidence? Do you coach just for confidence? Because I sense that you're going to say match point or first ball, I don't care, serve your best serve.
Yeah, that's exactly right. We've talked about this a lot. I think serving is probably the hardest thing to coach in coaching. I think there's a lot of different philosophies out there too, and I don't know that anybody's really gotten it right. I think there's still lots of room to improve. I sometimes wonder, is it possible for a team to hit a hard-driven jump serve all the time and have an error percentage below 15%? I'd like to think that that's possible, and it's something we continue to shoot for. There's so many things that guys hear. That's part of the problem, in that, it's after a timeout, it's match point, it's keep this one in, and you'll just never hear that out of my mouth. I don't look at an ace to error ratio. I don't think that's all that valuable to me. I look at point scoring. And at the end of the day, it's point scoring. Clay Stanley probably missed 30% or more of his serves. So are you going to tell Clay Stanley to hit his serve in because you think his error percentage is too high? I mean, what you need to look at is how many points he scored, and the other two serves that went in, he was scoring them at a really high rate. So at the end of the day, his scoring percentage was well over 30%, right? Probably 40%. So if Clay is hitting the ball in the net 1 out of every 3 serves, are you saying anything to him? Not a chance.
Yeah.
And so I think we kind of have to have some perspective on what the point is of serving, and that's to score a point.
Yeah.
Now the other thing is to understand that there's just some error involved in what you do. And if you go back there and you're just serving the ball and you're not paying attention to the score, or maybe you're in a drill where you're not scoring at all, and you're just serving the ball, you're going to err at a certain percentage. Now, Matt has a really high level of skill. Certainly developing skill and technique is a factor in all this stuff, right? So Matt has a very consistent toss. He's got really good hand-eye coordination. He's become a very good high ball hitter. He has great top spin on that ball, so he has good control. And so his error ratio is below 20%. I think it's 16% or something. I'd have to look it up again. So if Matty's back there and he's hitting it without any thought, he's going to be serving it, say 20% errors, right? And it doesn't matter. It's going to be 20% errors. It's a very complex skill. And so you have to understand that that's the case. And if you teach somebody to hit a serve like that every single time, regardless of the score, they're still going to err at 20%. And what we think is that when guys ease off or they're told to keep it in, or it's match point ball, or there was just a timeout, that the error ratio really doesn't change all that much, and you're giving the other team an opportunity to side out at a higher rate. And what are you here to do? I'm telling you, my team's here to win, and he's going to go hit that ball. And I want him to hit it hard. I want it to be aggressive. And so we have been trying to continue to work on technique, continue to work on fundamentals, continue to train it. I think volume has a lot to do with it. I think I train a lot of serving. But also this mindset that is serving has a built-in probability. And we're going to work on it and try and lower it. But it's the equivalent of a coin flip. Now, the odds are different. It's not 50-50. It's better. It's 80-20, for example, right? But it's a coin flip. And you have to know that when you go back there and you hit that serve, this is what's going to happen. And if you go back there and you've missed 3 balls in a row, and that's freaking you out, and you're not playing with freedom, you're more likely to miss it. Whereas if you recognize it's like a coin flip, it's like you just flipped tails 3 times in a row. Is the next one more likely to be heads because the other ones were tails, or is it more likely to be tails because that's the way it's going right now? No. We all know that when you flip that coin the next time, it's 50-50.
Yeah, well
And
said.
if you're mentally tough and you're going back there and you're serving that ball, you know it's 80-20. And I want you to know that. I want you to be free as a result, knowing what you can do and knowing that if it goes in the net, that 20%, I know and you know that that's the way it is, and we don't care what all the pundits say, and we don't care what everybody else says about keep it in on match point. It's 80-20. Flip that coin, hit that ball.
Brilliant. Thank you. That leads us right into that person who controls the second touch. And you've got a pretty good player doing that right now. Again, probably the answer is both because he's been doing it for a while. But, Micah, talk to us about him.
Really, I think we're fortunate, and I think he's fortunate. I mean, I think it goes back to the opportunity that's been given him and how he's taken advantage of that opportunity, and that we have a player of his athleticism at this position. He's got some great leadership abilities. I think he could be a guy that could set this team for a long time. He's grown quite a bit this last year. I think he's gotten a lot better this year. I think he's set his best tournament for sure at the World Cup. I think bouncing back and forth between the university ranks and the national team was challenging for him. I think he had different circumstances in both places, and I think by the end of this summer he was exactly where we wanted him to be, and his connection was excellent. I think he's a hard worker. He wants to be great, and so he's going to put in the time. And he was really great with the guys, and I think it was because we knew we're talking about blocking earlier and how there's a lot of room to improve there, even though potentially compared to other teams we're good. At the end of the day, offensive hitting percentage is the most impactful thing on winning and losing. Obviously, that's impacted by passing and setting, of course, but our connection with hitters, the systems that we run, the tempos we play, is a very large emphasis of what we do in practice and what we did in August preparing for the World Cup. And so I'd like to think that the time that we put in paid off. I think that we had a really nice offensive tournament. I think he's maturing into a wonderful setter. As young as he is, this is his 3rd summer with us, so he's logged in some great hours at a young age, and you know how that works. That bodes well.
Yeah, for sure. BJ asks, the set he made late in the final match. He's in net zone 3 with 2 hitters in front of him, and he sets a great push or a 1-5, and they crush. You might practice that, but not often.
Shoot, I wish I could remember that. I don't know exactly that circumstance. He definitely has some athletic abilities that allow him. He's got some nice size. He jumps well. He's ambidextrous. He can flick that thing around pretty well. So, yeah, he can do some things that others can't. And obviously the other things that he brings, his serve, his block, his leadership abilities, he really has the chance to become a great player in the world.
So moving on to in a match when you can control, a lot of people are in their season at the girls level right now, and even at New York boys and things like that.
Right.
I found it fascinating at 21-16 in set 4 in that match that you had to win to make it. You couldn't lose the match and advance on to Rio yet. You said, you guys, it's 0-0. Talk to me about that. What you saying?
Well, yeah, it was something that we've been talking about all the way prepping for this tournament, the mindset that we were going to bring. I think the guys really bought into it. I saw a bunch of hashtag 0-0s on Instagram and Twitter, and so I guess that's one way now these days you can gauge your cultural impact. You can check your player's Twitter account. But yeah, we talked about it a lot. We won that first match versus Argentina, and our record was 0-0. And we talked about how we wanted to play it truly 1 point at a time, and the score was 0-0. And that timeout in particular I do remember that. We weren't playing it 1 point at a time at that point. The guys actually were overcompensating. They were trying to win the World Cup with a swing. That's what I think I said during that timeout. And they were trying to hit the ball so hard that they would get 2 points. It's just 1 point.
Right.
And so you got to remember, you got to teach winning moments. You got to be on that. And so I called that timeout and just emphasized for them one last time the mindset that we brought into the tournament and the mindset that we needed to finish with it.
So, you've got this, as you said, it's not the 2008 team. You've got this vets like David Lee on the court with Aaron Russell, who's really hasn't been out of college since May. At the high school level, you've got freshmen and seniors and things like that. Do you have any tips that you've experienced on blending a team?
Yeah, I have a few thoughts there. You have to let them know what the expectation is for building a team. How you're going to treat one another. I've tried very hard to get away with the hierarchy. Even at UCLA, the freshmen don't set up the nets anymore. We all set up the nets. On the national team, it's no longer a hierarchy about who carries what on trips and who does laundry. We usually play for it. And if I can work that out, sometimes that doesn't always work out. So there's a little bit of those subtle things you can put into place that says nobody's better than one another just because you're older or younger. I think you can communicate the value that everybody brings. In this tournament, it was pretty obvious that Aaron Russell needed David Lee because he can learn a lot from how to talk the game and analyze the game and prepare for the game. David's is a pro. And David Lee needed Aaron Russell to have the legs that he had in the 11th match because David didn't have them, but Aaron was flying around. So there's everybody brings some things that benefit the team. And the other thing that I've been pretty adamant about is trying to do away with this concept of accountability. I have everybody's talking about it now. A lot of articles I read. It's a buzzword. Every coach talks about accountability. I can tell you that in the national team gym, I've been pretty vocal about eliminating it from our gym, and I think it's paid real big dividends. Accountability. I think you need to really define it. Okay, so maybe I shouldn't say I'm eliminating it, but I'm really spending a lot of time talking about what it is, because accountability, if you just say accountability, I know what that means in the national team gym and in the UCLA gym. Accountability means that you're going to tell somebody when they screwed up. And that's a real dangerous place to go, I think. Accountability is high conflict. Accountability is blame. And what ends up happening is you do two things, is you either empower, most people are good people, most people don't really want to get into a conflictual situation, So when you say we're going to run a gym of accountability, what you end up doing, at least as I've seen it, is you end up empowering the people that are the most dysfunctional. The guys that actually want to get into a conflict. They want to yell at somebody and say, get that ball, you get that ball, screaming at one another. It's just a disaster. And the good people, the people that you want, good character people, they're not eagerly going to engage in that. The other thing, too, is it reinforces hierarchy. I mean, we could talk about accountability all day long, but do you think Aaron Russell, if you brought him into a gym and say, hey, this gym is about accountability, we're accountable to one another, do you think Aaron Russell would ever yell at David Lee? Not a chance, because there's this hierarchy that's involved. So by talking about a gym of accountability, you are actually empowering a division between old and young. And so I've tried very hard to let everyone know the value that everybody brings, and that ultimately their job as teammates is to make their teammates better. And then you have to talk about what that actually sounds like, because some people don't even know how to do that. And
Yeah.
not because they're bad people, because they've always been in these gyms where accountability is encouraged. Now,
Yeah.
there's some aspects of accountability. Again, this gets to defining accountability. I wouldn't use the word accountability. I think, to me, the connotations, a road I've seen before too many times that's not great. But I think you do want to have somebody feel comfortable talking to somebody about what happened on the last play. Like, I did this, you did this, we were supposed to do this, what are we doing on the next play? Okay, so some people can define that as accountability. That's not how it gets executed on a gym, but I think you do want to have somebody, if they're off the court and they see something that's not going right. In the collegiate world, if you're out at a fraternity party and one of your teammates is starting to drink too much, you want to be able to feel comfortable going up to him and say, hey, man, that's enough. Let me take you home. Like, there are those aspects of accountability which are healthy. You want to be able to tell somebody, hey, we got to work hard. But ultimately, what I've tried very hard to do, which is a little bit of a change, is that the guys are accountable to the staff. Okay? It's my job to tell somebody that they need to dig that ball, that they need to hit the floor, that they need to make sure they do a better job there. It's not the teammate's job. The teammate's job is to make that guy better, to support him in his endeavor. And so I've been pretty vocal about that, which is a change from what it's been before. But I tell you, I think it's paid off pretty well. And
Hey,
I think,
that's awesome stuff, John. That's awesome stuff.
yeah.
Chang writes, Papelbon choking Bry Harper as a bad accountability example in the dugout there.
Oh, yeah. I think, and I think you have to, there's a language, there's a vernacular that you use with teams, and if you keep talking that way, eventually it comes out. I'll give you an example. Like, the last Olympics, or last World Cup, so 4 years ago, we did have a pretty big divide between the old and the young. And Alan knew it, and we were talking about it, and I said, Alan, let me run a team session. We were already eliminated from qualifying at the World Cup. We had a real tough start, which probably exacerbated our situation last quad. And I said, there's this elephant in the room. Let me talk to the guys and see if we can just bring it. We got to talk about this between the young guys and the old guys, because we got to get better. And Alan was great. I mean, I really liked working with Alan. And he said, yeah, go for it. And I said, okay, I'm going to lead it. So I get in there and I say, listen, I know that there's this elephant in the room. We got these old guys, these young guys, and I just don't feel like there's a lot of love in the room. A hand immediately shoots up. And a player goes, I don't believe in love. I don't believe it's important for a team to have it. I won a gold medal with players that didn't invite me to their wedding. I don't think it's important, and I don't think we should be talking about it. And I went, whoa. I mean, how about that for starting off a team meeting? And I said, Alan, you want to take this from here? I got nothing. So, I don't know that I've necessarily talked about love in particular. Okay, I actually don't know that I've ever really specifically talked about that, but I have talked about dynamics and who we are and the team we want to be. But I was really almost moved when we were in the press conference after we won the World Cup, and maybe you saw the quote, and I don't have it totally memorized, but Matt Anderson was asked about his experience, and he said, when you play with love and passion, and he used another adjective, he said anything is possible. And I mean, that is, for one of our obviously significant players, the MVP of the World Cup, to talk about how important it is to compete with love. I mean, that is a real development for this group and this team, and you can see it in the way they interact. Um, you can see it in the way that I think they truly, genuinely love playing with one another. I think this team is developing a team identity. It's not all the way there, but it's certainly well along the way. I'm pretty proud of that.
Wow. So that kind of a question that popped in is, with all that and the non-hierarchy, how do you pick your captain?
Shoot, I hate captains. I wish I could do away with captaincy. I haven't had a captain in any of my collegiate teams since 2007. Um, I only do it with the national team because I'm forced to by international protocol, and every single guy that I name as captain, I've named a bunch. It's been Clay. This quad, let's see, Clay, no, not Clay, Rooney, David Lee, Matt Anderson. I'm missing somebody. Anytime I have a team captain, I walk up to him and I tell him, you're going to be team captain for this tournament, but it doesn't mean anything to me. So I'm being forced to put a bar under your number, and apparently you'll talk to the referee. But, other than that, it's meaningless. Leadership comes from all different ways. Because I put a bar underneath your name or your number doesn't mean that you have to do anything different. I mean, I've seen all kinds of responses to that, and I wish we could eliminate it.
That's awesome. Awesome stuff. Okay, so as we sort of get ready to wrap up, and I do want you to punch on your video camera so they can see you towards the end of this, but now,
Okay.
hey, you got Brazil at home.
Yeah.
School teams, you go UCLA at USC, and then they play you back and forth in rivalries. Is there any thoughts about any suggestions to young kids playing not in their home gym but in an away situation that you've learned over the road trips and the 24 time zones you have to compete in with as opposed to your backyard as a national team coach?
Yeah. It can be hard. I think you just have to embrace it. You have to appreciate. I mean, I think we all love going over to USC to play at SC. Last year we had some trouble with traffic. We actually had to park blocks away. We're walking through the hood, and and our guys were playing the radio, and they didn't mind it. And we teach them to be prepared for all the negative things that can occur during a match or before it. So they embraced it. We were just walking, ready to go play. We got there like literally 45 minutes before the match, threw on our jerseys and went and played, and the guys loved it. It was really a great match, and so I think you just have to understand it can be hard. You can be in gyms where you're getting heckled, and in our case, you can be jet lagged and playing in really hostile environments, and you just have to love that because that's really
Yeah,
when
it's
you
so
have that contrast. When you're, for example, you can be in a gym in Poland and 15,000 people making noise like you haven't heard, or in Iran this summer was unbelievable,
yeah. Tell me
and
about
that's where
Iran
you,
because that seemed
you know,
to be almost an anomaly where boom boom you just kind of got knocked off.
well, man, I've been in a lot of gyms, and I've never been in a gym like that. I mean, it was incredible. So they have this gym that seats about 12,000, I think. I've heard estimates up to 17,000 people were packed in there, and I believe it. There's no fire codes. There's 3 or 4 people jammed in every aisle. Guys hanging off poles and the railings. They're just sitting on the railings all the way into all the walkways. You could look down the walkways and see people standing all the way back there, and they're choreographed in their noise. So I'd heard about the noise. I'd been warned about it from other coaches, and So we walk out there. I was curious as to what the experience was going to be. Obviously, we hear a lot of things in the media, which turn out are all pretty much inaccurate, which isn't shocking. So we go out there. The national anthem happens. I'm wondering how that's going to be received. Very respectful. I thought that was really cool. And then they are serving first, okay? And they go up, and just as the guy tosses the ball, there is this amount of noise that I to this day I can't really fathom how a group of human beings can make something that loud. Uh, It really, and so it happens, but it happens before the play initiates. So I think you're kind of used to a play occurring and a crowd going crazy. They are so good that they literally start cheering with this unbelievable din to try and distract you before the play starts. And I mean, the play started, the play ended, and then the place goes quiet. And I remember I literally was on the sideline and I went, whoa. I mean, I had never heard anything like that in my life. And I've been to like a Tennessee football game. I've been to some environments, nothing like this ever. Come close. And that's how they are from the first point to the last point. And it was so loud that even in timeouts, all 17,000 people, they do something where like the crowd turns their back, they all go arm in arm, and they're all singing these chants. You can't communicate. So I got a dry erase board, like a little dry erase clipboard, and I would write the notes, and then I'd hand it to the guys. They'd pass it around the timeout huddle, and then they'd go back out there and play. It was impossible to communicate. It was impossible to talk from a coaching staff to the court. I mean, at the end of the match, I mean, my ears hurt, like physically hurt, for probably, I don't know, 3 or 4 days. And the next match, I was like, forget it, I'm just going straight earplugs. And it helped. But I mean, I've never been in an environment like that. And I think our guys there's a lot to that trip.
Yeah.
First time going to Iran, all the media. I think everybody's wife was home in a panic. You're in a new environment that you've never been before, a lot of media.
Yeah.
I think next time we go, which will certainly occur, I think we'll be better prepared.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Hey, so you've got this. You're the big dog right now, helping us grow the game by winning and being such great role models and showing us this process that you spent already 90 minutes helping so many people that are going to either listening in or going to listen to it as the recording. What if you had a magic wand or something, realistic but reach goals for men and boys college volleyball to feed your pipeline in the future as we wind this interview down?
Mm-hmm. There's a few I have. I've had some thoughts about this. I really think that one of the things I see overseas is that younger players come in and they have greater variety in their game. So obviously we've had young players that can come in and physically keep up with what's going on, but the players that we're having come in that can contribute to our team are also players that have been exposed to the game at a really young age. For example, Aaron Russell, his dad played at Penn State. He grew up around the game. Taylor Sander grew up playing on the beach. These guys have been around and touched the ball in doubles and beach and seen high-level volleyball from a young age. I'd like to make that more accessible to everybody. There's a couple ways to do that. In other countries, I think a lot of these players grow up watching professional volleyball, and we don't do that here in the United States. And I know the challenges of starting a professional league, so I'm not saying that's the answer. I actually think we have to find some other ways to expose our young players to what it's like to play high-level, creative volleyball, and to give them an idea of how to play the game in a non-monotonous kind of way. I just see a lot more variety from a lot of players, and I'm trying to teach. I'm telling you, it's been a very big endeavor for me. We play doubles, two-touch, one-touch. All kinds of little games, three-man. all these overnet pepper games. I really am trying to improve our team's ability to be creative. I don't see that a lot in youth today. I'd like to figure out a way to get them to see professional volleyball, and I think there's some ways we could do that technologically, and maybe USA Volleyball could be a means for disseminating that kind of information, and creating a movement for that through club coaches. I also think we need to bring our guys in at younger ages. I'm not talking about specialization and getting into that argument. I really feel like the youth national team and the junior national team, the opportunities that boys have to play for those teams during the summers and maybe even during the year and expanding clinics and doing those things could really help with their ability to transition into the national team to see high-level volleyball. We have this training center with I don't know how many courts at the American Sports Center. We should be having people in there all the time watching us play. I think that would really help a kid who's 16 years old. I think we need to come up with other programmatic ideas, hire a youth development director, or do some things that can really expand the exposure. I mean, I think the growth of the boys' game can come in two ways. One is we do a better job of training the players that we currently have, and we know that boys volleyball is not huge, but taking care of the boys that we do have. How do we train them better? How do we to make their game better? How do we take the top-end talent, the guys that are touching 12 feet, how do we get those guys into our gym sooner? And then the second goal is to try and expand the talent base. And I think that can be a real extended conversation too, but our demographic is not as expansive as it needs to be. I think our talent pool is funneled towards us through club volleyball, which costs too much money. And I think we need to figure out a way to expand our demographic and get volleyball to a broader variety of socioeconomic status players. And so I'd like to see that too.
So, John,
those
what
are big
about,
projects.
Can I send my video guys to the gym on certain days leading up to Rio, like, targeted days that you're going to be filmed live and recorded so that a practice, and I'm talking maybe 3 or 4 cameras coming around, and we've got these 3D, or I've got the 360i camera lens that I got for that department. Can we work together to get a practice or two that can be both webcast but also film so that people can see it? Is that okay?
I think that'd be great, and I think we should do a better job of even sending out our videos of us just playing. I mean, I think the exposure's been better. Obviously all of our World Cup matches were on YouTube or in Universal Sport. Most of our World League matches are now available for people to see, and any endeavor we can do to increase the exposure of our game, especially at the highest levels, I think makes a difference. I mean, a young basketball player today can watch the NBA any night of the week, and I don't think our young players have an equal opportunity to see the level of play at the highest levels.
All right. Well, I've got you on my screen, and I I see you, but I'm watching the audience view, and I'm not seeing that. So I'm not sure.
I gave it a shot.
Yeah, you're looking nice, but the audience is only seeing my slideshow. So darn it, the technology is still defeating us. Why don't you turn yourself off?
Okay.
And let me see if I can do one more idea here to let people see you. So we're back to that. I did want to share that one last slide that you took, this picture.
Yeah.
I thought it was brilliant. I loved it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I don't think it got retweeted enough. But
right.
So I'm going to see if I can shut down the slideshow and see if you can pop up. End show. Okay. Turn that off. Okay. Now why don't you turn yourself on and see if we can get you, because I'm just looking at my screen right now again. And I see you, but the rest of the family doesn't, darn it.
All right.
I see your whiteboard. Maybe I should do a screen capture here and close things out, but
yeah.
darn it. So a couple more questions have come in. Oh, wait, they all say they can see you. Oh, everybody's saying hi. It's just not showing up in mine. So that's a cool thing. So This is John on live.
Hello, everyone.
The great job that he's done over time as I had hoped, because so many great things came out of it. There were a couple other interesting questions. One of them came in from, I think, overseas, just sort of, do you think that the World Cup, I'm sorry, the world champion should get a bid into the Olympics, which it isn't happened right now. What did you, what do you think about that, just from a 4-year cycle point of view?
Yeah, I think it's actually probably being discussed for the next quad. The next quad, I've talked to some people about it, is the World Cup may not be an Olympic qualifier because Japan is the one that hosts it, and they're already in the Olympics. So they're talking about the world champ getting a bid next quad. I don't know that that's going to occur. I think it's just a discussion topic. I kind of like it. I think being the world champ probably should get you in the Olympics. It is interesting, though, that it is 2 years before the Olympic Games, and I think you've seen a lot of changes that have occurred over the last 2 years to now. And so, that could potentially give a bid to a team that may not be as good 2 years from then. So, I don't know. It's an interesting topic of conversation. I think the World Championship is a great event. I mean, I think the world champ should probably get a bid to the Olympic Games.
All right. Coach Evans asks, when submitting your lineup, what's your first priority? Putting your setter in a good position to transition to the net, possibly your service order, or matchups, hitters versus blockers? What are you thinking in a lineup? You're spinning the rotation dial.
Yeah, you're thinking about a lot of things. There's a lot of different variables that go into each decision. I know Coach Skates was always a big fan of side-out percentages on rotations. Some rotations would be weaker than others, and so he would make decisions based on that. I've made decisions on that. Who's serving best, maybe your best serving lineup. Matchups are certainly a consideration sometimes. So, I mean, truthfully, all of the above have been decision-making points for me in the past, and probably should be as you're going through a match.
All right. It's you've been with us for nearly 2 hours. I'm honored both to have learned from you today, and at the same time, just proud that you guys qualified.
Thanks. Well,
USA
certainly we're
Volleyball
proud
is lucky
too. I
to
mean,
have you for sure.
oh, thank you, John. I appreciate that. I mean, I'm lucky to have this opportunity. For me, it's a pinch myself moment that I have an opportunity to coach this team and represent the United States. It's an incredible honor, and to be able to coach this era of player, I think it's a special time. I consider myself very, very lucky to be able to coach guys like Micah and Anderson and David Lee, and gosh, I could go down the whole list. I feel lucky to coach every single guy on that team. And,
Yeah.
I'm proud of them for the way they went through this tournament. I think this is the hardest tournament to win. Obviously the Olympics mean more. A lot of people probably think the world champs mean more, but I mean for 11 matches, 16 days, this is the most mentally and physically taxing tournament for sure. And for us to be there as a team and to be as solid as we were all the way through, I'm really proud of them.
All right. Everybody's saying congrats and thank you.
Thanks.
And I echo the same stuff. Get to your UCLA practice, because I know you've got a chance to do something new and different, be in a gym.
I've had a week off and we have practice at 3:30, so I literally am working on it right here, and I'm heading into the gym. So that's what I do.
All right, buddy. Thanks for everything, and let us know how we can help. And everybody knows how to reach John on Twitter to follow his feed that way, but you can also email us at firstname.lastname@usav.org. Now, that said, when we tried to do that with John, it has been 739 days since he checked that email. So
Yeah.
I think
It's one
you're
of
going
those
to need to
administrative
reach into.
decisions I had to make managing 2 jobs, John. I had to cut something out.
All right, sign off, and thank you all for attending
All right.
the USAV webinar.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye, guys.
All right, bye.